In the high-stakes world of the British monarchy, an empire can be completely dismantled without a single raised voice. What Queen Camilla just realized behind closed doors, as her most senior aides were abruptly denied entry to the Wales family apartments by a flashing red security terminal, is a cold and devastating truth. You can wear the exquisite crown jewels, you can attempt to rewrite the palace hierarchy, and you can demand the deferential bows of the aristocracy. But you cannot lock the future king out of his own dynasty. This is the story of a silent, ruthless institutional execution. We are going to unpack the secret power grab Camilla attempted during the monarchy's most vulnerable hour, how she weaponized administrative protocol to freeze out Princess Catherine's mother, Carole Middleton, and the devastating soundless retaliation orchestrated by Prince William. By the end of this analysis, you will understand the profound difference between the temporary illusion of absolute power and the staggering reality of a woman who just realized she has handed the true heir the exact justification he needed to lock her out forever. To understand the magnitude of this sudden administrative humiliation, we must first rebuild the formidable illusion of power that Camilla spent 3 decades carefully constructing. For years, she navigated the treacherous waters of palace politics, evolving from the ultimate royal outcast to the anointed queen consort. She weathered the bitter fallout of the 1990s and slowly, meticulously clawed her way to the side of the king. This was not an accident. It was a masterclass in psychological public relations and relentless patience. Once the crown was physically placed upon her head at Westminster Abbey, her confidence mutated into a dangerous sense of absolute entitlement. She felt she had Charles completely controlled, operating under the assumption that time and persistence had permanently erased the lingering legacy of Princess Diana. In her mind, the transition was complete. She began to elevate her non-royal children and her inner circle, pushing them into the royal spotlight, testing the boundaries of protocol, and assuming that the sprawling bureaucracy of the crown was simply too vast to challenge her directives. She felt invincible, insulated by the heavy velvet ropes of an institution she believed she had finally conquered. But this illusion of absolute power required a specific environment to thrive. It required a compliant younger generation and a complete lack of resistance from the core bloodline. This supreme confidence set the stage for her most audacious maneuver, executed during the darkest and most fragile months of Princess Catherine's medical absence. When Catherine was diagnosed and forced to retreat from public life to heal, the monarchy faced a terrifying vacuum of glamour and stability. Instead of stepping back to allow the family space to recover, Camilla reportedly saw an unprecedented opportunity to consolidate her narrative and establish herself as the undisputed, solitary matriarch of the firm. Recognizing that Carole Middleton was Catherine's ultimate emotional anchor and the primary, fiercely protective caretaker for the Wales children during this crisis, Camilla's office initiated a quiet, calculated administrative strike. Under the guise of a routine palace-wide security review, Camilla's aides discreetly targeted the access clearances for the Middleton family. To the outside world, this might have been spun as standard protocol optimization or a necessary tightening of the royal security perimeter during a vulnerable time. But behind closed doors, it was recognized as a cruel, calculated campaign of institutional erasure. By stripping Carole Middleton of her long-held VIP-level access passes and forcing her to navigate the standard, heavily vetted visitor channels, Camilla was attempting to sever the Wales family from their non-royal support system. It was an attempt to make the process of seeing her own grandchildren a bureaucratic nightmare for Carole. More importantly, it was a subtle, highly aggressive signal to the palace establishment that Catherine's family held no permanent institutional weight, and that Camilla alone dictated who belonged in the inner sanctum. She assumed that with Catherine too weak to resist, and William utterly consumed by the immense pressure of his wife's illness and his father's weakened state, This quiet bureaucratic suffocation would go unnoticed until it became the new normal. It was a staggering miscalculation. What Camilla failed to recognize is that Prince William, who now commands the immense, billionaire-tier machinery of the Duchy of Cornwall, does not miss subtle shifts in administrative paper trails. William has spent years mastering the intricate legal and security architecture of the state. When his private security detail flagged the anomaly, noting that the future Queen's mother was being subjected to the entry procedures of an ordinary contractor, William recognized the maneuver for exactly what it was. To the Prince of Wales, this was not merely a breach of event etiquette or a simple misunderstanding of the guest list. It was a direct, calculated insult to the uncomplaining sacrifice of his wife, and a dangerous overreach into his personal domestic sanctuary. Furthermore, for William, this aggressive maneuvering was a painful, immediate echo of the manipulative backroom tactics that had caused his late mother so much agonizing paranoia decades ago. William did not scream. He did not confront Camilla in the echoing corridors of the palace. He did not leak tearful complaints to the press, nor did he engage in the trashy, commercial desperation that so often plagues those adjacent to the crown. Instead, he utilized the cold, majestic machinery of the state to execute a master stroke of retaliation. Working in complete alignment with the highest levels of royal security command, the Prince of Wales orchestrated a profound, unprecedented transfer of access authority directly into his own office. Without a single public announcement or a word of warning to the Queen Consort, William effectively initiated a palace coup of the security matrix. What looked like a routine administrative update was actually a total dismantling of Camilla's domestic empire. William not only immediately restored Carole Middleton's security clearance, but he explicitly elevated it. He granted his mother-in-law permanent unrestricted access protocols on par with senior full-time working royals, legally securing her presence within the family's perimeter beyond the reach of any other office. And then the trap snapped shut. By aggressively weaponizing the exact bureaucratic systems Camilla had tried to exploit, William turned the administrative blade back on her own inner circle. When Camilla's personal staff and trusted aides attempted to access the private corridors linking to the Wales's domain, fully expecting to assert their usual dominance, they found the doors metaphorically and literally locked. Their passes, which had previously allowed them unprecedented VIP entry across all palace wings, had been quietly audited and severely downgraded under the direct authorization of the heir to the throne. They were redirected to the standard side door entry procedures entirely blocked from the Wales family's operational orbit. Camilla was left standing in her gilded apartments, suddenly suffocated by the staggering realization that her attempt to isolate Catherine had backfired spectacularly. She had handed William the perfect protocol-driven justification to permanently draw an ironclad boundary around his bloodline, leaving her completely powerless on the outside looking in. The immediate aftermath of this security lockout was not marked by explosive arguments in the drawing rooms of Buckingham Palace. It was defined by a chilling absolute silence that rippled through the administrative offices of the firm. As Camilla stood in her private apartments, holding the downgraded access reports of her most trusted aides, the grand illusion of her absolute authority evaporated. The doors to the Wales family perimeter had not just been physically locked, they had been institutionally sealed. She realized with cold, dawning horror that she had entirely miscalculated the limits of her own power. In a state of growing desperation, watching her meticulously constructed empire of domestic influence unravel in plain sight, Camilla broke the most fundamental rule of royal survival. She panicked, bypassing the established chain of command and the sophisticated network of private secretaries. She turned instinctively to the one man who had spent 3 decades serving as her ultimate indestructible shield. She marched into King Charles's private study, carrying the physical proof of her staff's sudden demotion. She presented the sovereign with the reality of the administrative shutdown, demanding that he unleash his imperial authority to override his son's directives, restore her team's VIP access, and put the Middletons back in their place. She expected the king to share her profound moral outrage. For years he had defied his own mother, his nation, and the relentless British press to elevate her status and protect her from the deep undercurrents of institutional resentment. She demanded a fierce reprimand of the Prince of Wales, assuming that Charles would instantly choose the peace of his marriage over the bureaucratic maneuvering of his heir. But as she waited for the king to speak, what she received instead was a devastating, icy silence that changed the reading of everything. Charles did not reach for his pen. He did not summon his private secretary to draft an immediate countermand to royal security. He simply looked at the revised security matrix, entirely aware of the inescapable constitutional trap his son had flawlessly executed. That silence from King Charles was not just a failure of a husband to protect his wife, it was the ultimate institutional betrayal. Charles realized in that singular, agonizing moment that William had not acted out of mere spite. The Prince of Wales had acted within his absolute, undeniable rights as the heir, defending the boundaries of his own household and protecting the family of his wife during an unprecedented medical crisis. If Charles were to override a formal security directive designed to protect the vulnerable Princess of Wales, simply to soothe the wounded ego of his queen, he would trigger an internal civil war that his current reign simply cannot afford to wage. Faced with the stark reality of choosing between the structural survival of his dynasty and the domestic ambitions of his wife, the ancient machinery of the monarchy automatically corrected itself. Charles chose the preservation of the Windsor line. His refusal to intervene was an explicit demonstration of the limits of Camilla's power, a silent reminder that while she may share his bed and wear the crown, she does not inherit the sovereign authority of the bloodline. To understand the absolute terror of Camilla's realization in that moment, we have to look past the historical diamonds and examine the staggering commercial desperation hiding beneath her royal titles. For years, Camilla operated under the illusion that securing the title of queen meant securing an empire. But titles are merely ink on parchment. In the ruthless billionaire-tier reality of the British monarchy, true power is measured in land, in sovereign grants, and in private real estate. And Camilla owns absolutely none of it. She does not control the sprawling, billion-dollar Duchy of Cornwall. William does. She does not own the private estates of Highgrove or Sandringham. The entire financial architecture of the monarchy is designed to pass seamlessly from monarch to heir. Every luxury Camilla enjoys, from the state cars to the highly guarded private apartments, is effectively an institutional lease that is completely dependent on the goodwill of the reigning sovereign and the future king. If Charles were to pass away tomorrow, Camilla would be reduced to a dowager queen with zero institutional leverage. She would have no sovereign right to the palaces she currently dictates, no control over the royal purse strings, and no blood connection to the reigning monarch. Her frantic, quiet attempt to freeze out Carole Middleton and elevate her own inner circle was driven by this exact panic. It was a scramble for territorial collateral in a game where she holds no real cards. She wanted to establish a dangerous precedent where her family held the ultimate proximity to the crown, while the true bloodline was marginalized. William watched this commercial desperation unfold, let her expose her intentions, and then weaponized the institution's protocol to remind her that she is a temporary guest in a house she does not own. By locking down the security perimeters and officially elevating Carole Middleton, William essentially cut off Camilla's ability to build an independent fortress of influence before the inevitable transition of power occurs. This silent offensive is not merely about protecting a guest list. It is about the systematic restoration of a legacy that many believed had been permanently erased. For Prince William, every revoked pass and every subtle boundary drawn around his family carries a deeply personal emotional weight. It represents the quiet, enduring vindication of his mother, Princess Diana. whose place in history had been systematically marginalized during Camilla's ascent. William has watched for years as the institution slowly accommodated the woman who caused his mother immense grief. His current actions demonstrate that while he tolerated the compromise for the sake of his father's peace, he will absolutely not allow that compromise to threaten the sanctuary of his own wife and children. At the same time, this strategic correction serves to secure the undisputed path for Princess Catherine, whose uncomplaining sacrifice and steady commitment to the state have made her the true emotional anchor of the modern monarchy. While Camilla's strategy has often relied on backroom maneuvering and calculated public relations campaigns, Catherine has built her status on absolute institutional discipline and genuine public affection. The stark contrast between Camilla's commercial desperation and the quiet, dignified resilience of the Middleton family has not been lost on the palace establishment. Carole Middleton does not leak to the press, she does not scramble for royal titles, and she does not attempt to alter palace protocols to benefit her other children. She simply exists, doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes, honoring the privacy of her daughter, and providing the unshakable foundation that the Wales children desperately need. By wrapping Carole in the absolute impenetrable security of the crown, William is honoring the family that actually sustains the future of the monarchy. The signs of this permanent correction are now everywhere, if you know how to read the subtle clues embedded in royal protocol. What we began to see in the weeks following the security lockout were devastating visual shifts that entirely erased Camilla's domestic footprint. It was noticed in the way the highly guarded gates of the Windsor estate operated. Vehicles carrying the Middleton family are now seamlessly waved through the primary VIP checkpoints, their access permanently encoded into the supreme architectural authority of the estate. Meanwhile, insiders noted that the administrative passes for Camilla's extended family and her private media teams are subjected to rigorous, humiliating delays. They are frequently redirected, questioned by security personnel, and forced to wait for explicit, written clearance from the Prince of Wales's office before taking a single step into the restricted zones. This is not a petty slight. It is a masterful administrative execution. By strictly adhering to the new rules, William severed her access to the illusion of power without ever uttering a single word. The psychological impact on Camilla is inescapable. She must now play out the remainder of this reign with the flawless composure required of her rank, standing before the flashing cameras and smiling for the global press. But she does so knowing that the structural foundation of her power has been completely eroded. She realized that despite all the strategic campaigns, the backroom deals, and the forced smiles, she is merely a temporary placeholder. The trap has completely snapped shut. The British crown remains undefeated, quietly absorbing personal ambition, resetting its boundaries, and proving once again that true power belongs not to those who manipulate the system, but to those who embody its survival. The future of the monarchy is firmly, undeniably in the hands of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and all Camilla can do now is stand quietly in her borrowed jewels, forced to watch as the empire she thought she conquered is handed back to the family she tried to destroy. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the hidden dynamics of the royal institution. If you appreciate this level of forensic analysis and want to understand the real power plays happening behind closed doors, hit the subscribe button and join our community. We will see you in the next breakdown.